U.S. President Joe Biden has begun his first trip abroad since taking office. Biden and his wife, Dr. Jill, landed at the Mildenhall Royal Air Force base in England last night to start an 8-day trip to Europe. He addressed U.S. troops and their families at the base, saying he planned to rebuild ties with Europe after the Trump presidency. His visit will include stops at the G7 summit in Cornwall, where he's expected to meet President Cyril Ramaphosa. Sherwin Bryce-Pease reports that a large part of this visit will be to shore up European alliances that were severely undermined during the presidency of Donald Trump.
In brief remarks before boarding Air Force One for the transatlantic flight, Biden suggested this trip was about re-establishing bonds while sending a clear message to his country's adversaries, perceived or otherwise.
Strengthening the alliance, make it clear to Putin and to China that Europe and the United States are tight and the G7 is going to move.
Mr. President, do you expect to come out with a vaccine strategy for the world?
I have one and I'll be announcing it.
White House officials pressed on what that could mean as an add-on to key announcements last week of the first tranche of vaccine donations to the rest of the world, some 25 million out of a total of 80 million doses the U.S. hopes to share by the end of June.
At the G7, he will join with his fellow leaders to lay out a plan to end the COVID-19 pandemic with further specific commitments towards that end. He will also join his fellow leaders to announce a new initiative to provide financing for physical, digital, and health infrastructure in the developing world, a high-standard, climate-friendly, transparent, and rules-based alternative to what China is offering.
You all hear more at the G7. I don't want to get ahead of that too much. But what I would say is that the United States we're headed into the G7 in a position of strength with 64% of our adult population vaccinated, in a position to donate more doses to the world than any other country around the world. But we certainly know this needs to be a global effort, and it will be a discussion at the G7, and we'll have more to say in the coming days.
G7 leaders also plan to launch a clean green initiative to support sustainable development and a green transition in developing countries. They'll endorse a deal to impose a global minimum corporate tax rate of 15% as a boost to the world economy and re-examine commitments to a free and fair multilateral trading system, with an eye to a much-anticipated meeting with Russia's leader in Switzerland in 7 days.
In terms of the timing, it is hard from our perspective to find a better context for a meeting with the Russian president than after time spent with the world's leading market economies, the G7, plus India, South Korea, Australia, and South Africa, after a meeting with all of his fellow leaders at NATO, after a meeting with the presidents of the European Union, and then and only then going into this session to be able to talk through the complex set of issues in the U.S.-Russia relationship. That, from our perspective, is the right context within which to engage Russia.
American diplomacy closely watched after the ruptures that emerged under Biden's predecessor. So frayed were relations when the U.S. chaired the G7, the 2020 annual summit never materialized due to former President Trump's insistence that it be held in person at the height of a global pandemic, something other leaders refused to commit to. So Biden will try to strike a different tone, seek to assert America's leadership and soft power while affirming Washington's commitment to multilateral solutions. That will be the goal. The question is, can real solutions be found to what is today the most pressing international concern, ending the coronavirus pandemic everywhere? Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Sophie Mokoena is a foreign editor here at the SABC, and she joins us now to take that story forward. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for talking to us. It's Joe Biden's first foreign trip as president. He addressed a hangar of U.S. troops in the UK. Big takeaways for you from his speech. Sherwin Bryce-Pease was saying just now that he will seek to strike a different tone at the meeting.
Well, of course, yesterday when one listened to his message, it was a clear indication of what he is up to there at the G7, emphasizing a need to fight COVID-19, talking about access to vaccines, but also talking about the coming meeting between him and the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, in Switzerland, and saying that America is back, therefore indicating that America is intending to take its rightful place in the community of nations around the world, and also emphasizing the fact that you look at how he can make an announcement in terms of giving poorer countries or developing countries vaccine. We had that there were reports in the United States of America that he's intending to buy 500 million vaccine doses from Moderna and also from Pfizer, and those doses will be donated to developing countries. And it is clear the intention here will be more of a body language and also a signal that America wants to be involved again in global matters, and him emphasizing the issue of multilateralism, something that Donald Trump didn't subscribe to. And therefore, there's a glimmer of hope, particularly to the friends of the Americans in Europe, that America being back, him going to meet NATO in Brussels, an indication that the relations within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization are going to be revived. And I think the message from the U.S. is that I'm the new man, I'm the new sheriff in town, and I'm willing to reach out to the world.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has been invited and is expected to raise issues of financial support for developing nations tackling the effects of climate change. What do we expect here?
Yeah, the president is leaving this afternoon. He's going to join the leaders of the G7 and those who are invited, and he's going to have quite a number of bilaterals. But the big one, of course, will be his meeting with President of the United States of America. And I think here on the agenda will be the issue of the debt relief for poorer countries, particularly Sub-Saharan Africa, and also the issue of access to vaccines. You know, South Africa and India are pushing very hard that there should be an agreement at the World Trade Organization on TRIPS waiver for COVID-19 vaccines until the world is able to deal with the pandemic. But there's resistance from other countries saying that those who have invested in research of these vaccines will not be happy in future. The pharmaceutical companies are going to resist to spend money and time, and also countries donating for research purposes. But South Africa and India emphasizing the fact that, as we have done with HIV and AIDS, drugs and therapeutics, the same has happened with COVID-19 because it's a pandemic. He's also likely to talk to President Biden on the Middle East question. You know, South Africa's stance very clear in support of Palestinian cause, and also pushing for a free Palestine and two-state solution. The other issue, of course, will revolve around trade and investment, you know, trying to revive the previous strong relations South Africa had during Nelson Mandela's presidency, Thabo Mbeki's presidency, and also to ensure that they talk about multilateralism in particular. You had the president this week when he was addressing the AU Summit on Climate Change, him emphasizing that all leaders, and Africa in particular, must speak in one voice, very strong voice, pushing for multilateralism. And I think they will find one another on this one, because that's what Biden stands for, multilateralism. The issue of climate change, again, America is back. Yes, it's back in the Paris Agreement. Therefore, the president, South Africa, played a very important role in the signing of the Paris Agreement climate. And I think they will find one another. There might be issues here and there in terms of how you deal with the issue of climate change. But I think the issue of carbon emissions might be a sticky one. But I think they will find one another.
Sophie, thank you so much for giving us, setting the scene for us. Of course, it's a story we'll continue to talk about throughout the week. Sophie Mokoena is SABC News foreign editor.